Derek Martinez sat in his pickup truck, staring at the faded sign of the pawn shop across the parking lot. The July sun beat down mercilessly on the cracked windshield, turning the inside of the cab into an oven. Sweat dripped down his temples, but he barely noticed. His hands gripped the steering wheel so tight his knuckles had gone white. He'd been sitting there for almost half an hour now. Just sitting, thinking, or maybe trying not to think. The engine was off. He couldn't afford to waste gas just to run the air conditioning. Couldn't afford much of anything these days. That was the whole problem, wasn't it? That's what had brought him here to this dusty parking lot in a small Texas town, to a pawn shop he'd driven past 100 times without ever going inside. Until today. Derek was 34 years old, though he felt about 60 right now. His body ached from restless nights on a worn-out couch, the only furniture left in his apartment after his wife took everything else. His eyes were bloodshot and surrounded by dark circles that no amount of sleep seemed to fix. Not that he was getting much sleep anyway. 3 months. That's how long it had been since he lost his job at the construction site. Budget cuts, they said. Last hired, first fired. He understood the logic. But understanding didn't pay the bills. Understanding didn't keep the lights on or put food in the fridge. Understanding didn't stop the phone from ringing 5 times a day with calls from bill collectors. 2 months since his wife packed up their 7-year-old daughter and left. He couldn't blame her. What kind of future could he offer them? A man who couldn't even keep a roof over their heads. She'd moved back in with her parents 3 towns over. He got to see his little girl every other weekend, when he could afford the gas money to drive there. 1 week since the eviction notice appeared on his door. Bright yellow paper, impossible to ignore. 30 days to vacate. That deadline was creeping closer every morning he woke up with a knot in his stomach. Derek unclenched one hand from the steering wheel and rubbed his face. His palms scraped against 3 days of stubble. When had he last shaved? When had he last cared about things like that? The man staring back at him in the rearview mirror looked like a stranger. Hollow eyes, defeated posture, a man who'd given up. He watched people come and go from the shops around the parking lot. A young mother wrestled with 2 small kids in an armful of grocery bags, somehow managing to smile as one of them asked for ice cream. An elderly couple walked hand in hand toward the pharmacy, moving slowly but together. A group of teenagers spilled out of a burger joint, laughing at something on one of their phones, carefree and light. Everyone else's life just kept rolling along like normal. The world kept turning, completely indifferent to the fact that Derek's world had stopped. His phone buzzed in the cup holder. He glanced at it. Another call from a number he didn't recognize. Probably another collector. He'd stopped answering days ago. What was the point? He couldn't tell them what they wanted to hear. Couldn't promise payment when his bank account had been hovering at $37 for the past week. $37. That's what his life had been reduced to. A man who'd worked since he was 16, who'd never missed a day of work before the layoffs, who'd paid his taxes and played by all the rules. And here he was, almost middle-aged with less money than his daughter probably had in her piggy bank. The thought of his daughter made his chest tighten. What kind of father was he now? He'd missed her last soccer game because he couldn't afford the gas. Couldn't afford the gas to watch his own kid play soccer. The shame of that cut deeper than any of the other failures. Derek had called her last night. Just to hear her voice, to tell her he loved her. She'd been excited, talking about a field trip coming up, about a loose tooth, about a drawing she'd made at school. Normal kid stuff. Beautiful, ordinary kid stuff. He'd listened and made the right sounds, asked the right questions, pretended everything was fine. But she'd asked when she could come visit. Asked if she could see his new place. He'd made excuses, said he was still getting settled, maybe next month. The lie tasted bitter in his mouth. There was no new place. By next month, he'd probably be living in his truck. He couldn't let her see him like this. Couldn't let her know how far he'd fallen. The pawn shop door opened and a man walked out carrying a guitar case. He looked happy, or at least content. Maybe he'd just bought his dream guitar. Maybe he'd just sold it to pay rent. Derek wondered which scenario was worse. His hand moved to the door handle, then stopped. A war raged inside his head. Part of him screamed to start the truck, drive away, go anywhere but here. That part sounded like his mother's voice, like his daughter's laugh, like every good thing he'd ever known. But there was another voice, quieter but somehow louder, a voice that said he was tired. So incredibly tired. Tired of failing. Tired of disappointing everyone. Tired of waking up every morning to face another day of slowly drowning. That voice said this was the only way to stop hurting. The only way to stop being a burden to everyone who'd ever cared about him. His ex-wife would get his life insurance. Not much, but enough to help. She could give their daughter a decent life without him dragging them down. His parents were retired, comfortable. They didn't need a son who'd become a charity case. His friends, the few who still checked in, would be sad for a while. But eventually they'd move on. Everyone moved on. Derek had read somewhere that it takes 7 years for every cell in your body to replace itself. In 7 years, everyone he knew would literally be different people, and he'd just be a memory that got hazier with time. Maybe that wasn't so bad. Maybe that was mercy. He reached for the door handle again. This time his fingers closed around it. The metal was hot from the sun. Just go in, buy it, go home, and think about it more, he told himself. You don't have to do anything today. Just having the option will make you feel better. Just knowing there's a way out. That's what he'd been telling himself for the past 3 days, that he was just going to look. Just going to price things out. Just going to keep his options open. But Derek knew himself well enough to know he was lying. He knew where this road led. He pulled the handle and the door creaked open. Hot air rushed in, somehow even hotter than inside the truck. He swung his legs out, his work boots hitting the pavement. Those boots had walked across countless construction sites, climbed hundreds of ladders, built houses and schools and office buildings. Good boots, honest boots, boots that deserved a better man wearing them. Derek stood up, steadied himself. His legs felt weak, like they belonged to someone else. 20 yards across the parking lot to that door. 20 yards that felt like 20 miles. He took a step, then another. His body was moving, but his mind felt detached, floating somewhere above, watching this sad scene unfold. Some rational part of him was screaming, begging him to stop, but his feet kept moving forward. 15 yards now. The pawn shop's windows were cluttered with stuff. Musical instruments, jewelry, old electronics, tools. The flotsam and jetsam of other people's desperate situations. He'd be adding to that collection soon, 10 yards. He could see his reflection in the glass door now. Rumpled t-shirt. Jeans that were starting to hang loose because he'd been eating 1 meal a day to save money. The face of a defeated man, 5 yards. His hand was already reaching for his wallet, checking that his ID was there. You needed ID to buy a gun even from a pawn shop. The government made sure you were legally allowed to own the thing that would end you. There was irony in that somewhere, but Derek was too exhausted to find it. 3 yards. Then the world exploded into noise, screeching tires, the crunch of metal on concrete. Screaming. So much screaming. Derek's head whipped to the right. Across the street, a car had jumped the curb. It had plowed through a bus stop bench and people were scattered everywhere. The car sat at a crazy angle, half on the sidewalk, half in the street. Its front end was crumpled. Steam or smoke was rising from under the hood. Time seemed to slow down. Derek stood frozen, his hand still extended toward the pawn shop door. But he wasn't looking at the door anymore. He was looking at the chaos across the street. People were running, some toward the accident, some away from it. A man was shouting into his phone, probably calling for help. A woman was crying, her hands covering her mouth. And there were people on the ground. Several of them. Not moving. No, wait. Some were moving. Trying to get up. One person was crawling away from the car, but there was one person who wasn't moving at all. A young woman, trapped somehow between the mangled car and what was left of the concrete bench. Even from this distance, Derek could see the blood. His mind went completely blank. The fog of depression that had been clouding his thoughts for months suddenly lifted. In its place was perfect, terrible clarity. Someone was badly hurt. Maybe dying. His feet had been carrying him toward death 30 seconds ago. Now they were pivoting, turning away from the pawn shop, moving toward the street. He didn't make a conscious decision to do it. His body just moved. He broke into a run. The parking lot stretched out like it was growing longer, but his legs pumped harder. His boots slapped against the asphalt. He dodged between 2 parked cars, jumped over a parking barrier, and hit the street at a full sprint. A driver honked at him as he ran across. Derek didn't care. Didn't even register it. His eyes were locked on that woman trapped under the car. He reached the sidewalk and pushed through the small crowd of shocked bystanders. Nobody was doing anything. They were just standing there, frozen by fear or confusion or the simple human instinct to avoid getting involved. "Has anyone called 911? Derek shouted. His voice sounded strange in his own ears. Strong, authoritative, nothing like the defeated whisper it had been for months. "Yes, they're coming," someone answered. "I called." "Call again," Derek said. "Tell them we need multiple ambulances, now." He didn't wait to see if they listened. He was already moving toward the trapped woman. The car was a sedan, maybe 15 years old. The driver, an elderly man, was still behind the wheel, looking dazed and confused. The front passenger side was where the damage was worst. The bench had been concrete and metal, and when the car hit it, the bench had folded up and pinned the woman against the car's front quarter panel. Derek dropped to his knees beside her. Up close, it was so much worse. Her left leg was trapped at an angle that made his stomach turn. Blood was everywhere, pooling on the sidewalk, soaking through her clothes. Her face was pale, so pale it was almost gray. Her eyes were open but unfocused, her breath coming in short, panicked gasps. She was going into shock. Derek had seen enough construction site accidents to know what shock looked like, and he knew she didn't have much time. "Hey," he said, his voice gentler now. "Hey, can you hear me?" Her eyes tried to focus on his face. Her lips moved, but no sound came out at first. Then barely a whisper. "Help. Me." "I'm going to help you," Derek said. "I promise." "What's your name?" "Aisha." She managed to get the word out. "Aisha." "Okay, Aisha, I'm Derek. I'm right here with you." "You're not alone." Behind him, someone said the ambulance was 5 minutes away. 5 minutes? That might as well be 5 hours. Derek looked at Aisha's leg, at the blood still pumping out. She needed help now. His construction site training kicked in. Stop the bleeding. That was priority one. Always stop the bleeding. Derek grabbed the hem of his t-shirt and pulled it over his head in one swift motion. The sun hit his bare back, but he didn't feel it. He was already wrapping the shirt around Aisha's thigh, above where the bench was crushing her leg. He pulled it tighter as tight as he could manage. She cried out in pain. I know it hurts. I'm sorry. But I have to stop the bleeding," he said, his fingers working to secure the makeshift tourniquet. Aisha's eyes rolled back. She was slipping away. No. Stay with me, Aisha. Look at me. Look right at me." Derek leaned in close, putting his face directly in her line of sight. "That's it. Keep your eyes open. Tell me about yourself. Do you have family?" Her lips trembled. My parents, my brother. Good, that's good. They're going to want to see you. You need to stay awake for them, okay? What do you do? Do you work? Teacher, she whispered. 5th grade. A teacher. That's amazing. Those kids need you, Aisha. You've got to stay with me. Her hand groped blindly and found his. She gripped it with surprising strength, her fingernails digging into his palm. Her eyes locked onto his, desperate and terrified and pleading all at once. Derek squeezed back. I've got you. I'm not going anywhere. Somewhere in the distance he could hear sirens, but they still sounded far away, too far. The tourniquet was helping, but Aisha was still losing blood. Still trapped. Still dying right in front of him. He looked at the car, at the bench, at the terrible angle of her pinned leg. His mind raced through calculations. Weight distribution. Leverage points. Structural integrity. The same skills he'd used to build things for 15 years now being used to save a life. It was risky. So risky. Moving her wrong could make everything worse. But leaving her like this was certain death. Derek turned to the crowd. You and you. He pointed at 2 men who looked strong enough. I need help. We're going to lift this car just enough to get her out. On my count, you push right here. He indicated the spots. Don't lift, just push. Keep it stable. They hesitated. One of them said, Shouldn't we wait for the ambulance? Derek looked at Aisha. Her grip on his hand was weakening. Her eyes were starting to close. She doesn't have time to wait, he said. The sirens were getting louder now, but still not close enough. Derek made his decision. He positioned himself, placed his hands where he needed them, and looked down at Aisha one more time. I'm going to get you out, he told her. It's going to hurt like hell, but I promise you I will not let you go. Do you trust me? Aisha's eyes found his again. She gave the smallest nod. Derek took a breath. Around him, the 2 men got into position. Someone else was keeping the elderly driver away from the controls. The crowd had gone silent, watching. On 3, Derek said. 1, his muscles tensed. Every ounce of strength he had left in his exhausted body gathered itself. 2. Aisha's fingers tightened on his hand one more time. 3. The two men pushed. Derek pulled. And for one terrible moment, nothing happened. Then the car shifted. Just an inch, maybe 2. But it was enough, Aisha screamed. The sound cut through Derek like a knife, but he didn't stop. Couldn't stop. He had one chance to get this right. With the car moved just slightly, he could see the full extent of the damage. The bench had caught her leg at mid-thigh, crushing it against the car's front panel. Blood was everywhere, dark and slick on the concrete. But now there was just enough space. "Hold it steady," Derek commanded the two men. "Don't let it shift back." He positioned himself, sliding one arm under Aisha's shoulders and the other under her knees. She was small, maybe 5'3", thin, but when someone's hurt this bad, their body becomes dead weight. Every muscle goes limp. Lifting her was going to take everything he had. "Aisha, look at me," Derek said, his face close to hers. "I'm going to move you now. It's going to hurt worse than anything you've ever felt, but I need you to stay conscious, okay? Can you do that for me?" Her eyes were glazed with pain and shock, but she managed a tiny nod. Her lips formed a word he couldn't hear, but he read it clearly enough. "Please." Derek took a breath. Then he lifted. Aisha's scream ripped through the air again, even louder this time. Her body jerked and spasmed. The two men grunted as the car tried to settle back down, but they held it. Just barely. Derek pulled her free. The moment she cleared the gap, he stepped backward, cradling her in his arms. The men released the car and it settled back into place with a metallic groan, but Derek barely heard it. All his focus was on the woman in his arms. She was still screaming, a high-pitched wail of agony that made everyone nearby wince. Blood was soaking into his jeans, running down his arms. The tourniquet was holding, but barely. "You're out. You're out, Aisha. I've got you," he kept saying over and over like a prayer. "You're safe now." Her screaming faded to sobbing. She pressed her face against his bare chest, her whole body shaking violently. Derek could feel her tears mixing with the sweat and blood. The sirens were much louder now. Maybe a minute away, but Derek couldn't wait. Aisha needed medical attention immediately, and the ambulance would arrive at the street corner, not here in the middle of the sidewalk chaos. He started walking. Each step was agony. Not physical pain, though his muscles were burning and his back was screaming. No, it was the agony of carrying someone so fragile, so broken, knowing that every jostle might cause more damage, knowing that if he dropped her, if he stumbled, if he made one wrong move, she could die. "Talk to me, Aisha," Derek said as he walked. His voice was steady, controlled even though his heart was hammering. "Tell me about your students. What grade did you say, 5th? She didn't answer at first. Her eyes were closed, her face twisted in pain. "Aisha," he said more firmly, "stay awake. Tell me about your kids, 5th grade, she managed to whisper. 24 students. "Good kids, they're good kids. I bet they love you," Derek said. He was moving as quickly as he dared, heading toward the corner where the ambulance would likely stop. Every step felt like a mile. "I bet you're the kind of teacher they remember forever." "I try," she breathed. "I try to make them feel safe, feel seen." "You're going to keep doing that," Derek told her. "You're going to go back to that classroom. You're going to see them again." He didn't know if he believed it. Her leg looked bad. Really bad. And she'd lost so much blood already. But he said it anyway because she needed to hear it. Needed something to hold on to. "My parents," Aisha suddenly said, her voice gaining a tiny bit of strength. "Someone needs to call my parents. They'll be so worried. What's their number? I'll have someone call them as soon as we get you help." She started to recite numbers, but then her voice faded. Her eyes rolled back. No. Stay with me." Derek stopped walking, looked down at her face. "Aisha, don't you dare leave me now. We didn't come this far for you to check out. Open your eyes." Her eyelids fluttered, opened halfway. She looked up at him with an expression he'd never forget. Scared, trusting, desperate, all at once. "That's it. That's my girl. Keep those eyes open," he said. "Come on, ambulance is almost here. You hear those sirens? They're coming for you." He started walking again. The corner was just 20 yards away now. The sirens were deafening, and he could see the flash of red and blue lights reflecting off the buildings. His arms felt like they were going to fall off. His whole body was shaking with effort and adrenaline. Sweat poured down his face, stinging his eyes. But he didn't adjust his grip, didn't shift her weight. He held her as steady as a construction beam. as carefully as a newborn baby. 15 yards. 10. 5. The ambulance came screaming around the corner and screeched to a stop right in front of him. Paramedics burst out, already moving fast, pulling equipment. "What have we got?" one of them called out. A woman probably in her 40s with kind eyes and gray hair pulled back in a ponytail. Derek's legs finally gave out. He dropped to his knees on the sidewalk, but he kept Aisha elevated, kept her steady. "Crush injury to the left femoral area," he said, his voice suddenly hoarse. He sounded like someone else. Someone who knew what they were talking about. "Possible arterial damage. I put a tourniquet on about 12, maybe 15 minutes ago. She's been going in and out of consciousness, signs of shock." The paramedics were already swarming around them. One was checking her pulse, another was examining the tourniquet. A third was getting a stretcher ready. "Good work on this tourniquet," the gray-haired paramedic said, looking at Derek with something like respect. "You probably saved her life." Then they were lifting Aisha out of his arms, transferring her to the stretcher with practiced efficiency. The moment her weight left him, Derek felt empty, lost, like something essential had been taken away. He watched as they worked on her, starting an IV line, stabilizing her leg, putting an oxygen mask over her face. Their hands moved with speed and precision, and Derek felt a wave of relief. She was in good hands now, better hands than his. Someone touched his shoulder, a police officer, young with a concerned expression. "Sir, are you hurt? We need to check you out." Derek looked down at himself. He was covered in blood from the waist up. His jeans were soaked with it. His hands looked like he'd dipped them in red paint. "It's not my blood," he said. "I'm fine. You need to be evaluated anyway." "That was a hell of a thing you did. I just did what anyone would do." The officer gave him a strange look. "No, sir. That's not what anyone would do. That's what a hero does." Derek almost laughed. Hero. Him. The guy who'd been about to buy a gun 30 minutes ago. The guy who'd been planning to throw his life away. Some hero. More police were arriving now. They were interviewing witnesses, taking statements, directing traffic. Someone had called a second ambulance for the other injured people, who thankfully seemed to have only minor injuries. The elderly driver was being checked out, looking confused and upset. A paramedic approached Derek with a medical kit. "Let me just take a quick look at you, make sure you're okay." Derek nodded absently. He was still watching the first ambulance where Aisha was. They were loading her in now, moving fast. Critical condition. Every second counted. The paramedic was talking to him, checking his blood pressure, his pulse, looking into his eyes with a small flashlight. Derek answered questions automatically. No, he wasn't hurt. No, he didn't hit his head. Yes, he understood he might be in shock. "Your vitals are elevated, but that's normal after what you just went through," the paramedic said. "You're one lucky guy. And so is she, thanks to you. Lucky." That word felt wrong. Derek didn't feel lucky. He felt strange, disconnected, like he'd stepped out of his own life and into someone else's. A local news van pulled up. A reporter jumped out with a cameraman in tow. They started filming the scene, interviewing witnesses. Someone pointed at Derek. "Oh no," he muttered. No, but it was too late. The reporter was already heading his way. Microphone ready, that professional smile plastered on her face. Sir, can I ask you a few questions? We understand you pulled that woman from the wreckage. Can you tell us what happened?" Derek stood up, backing away. I can't. Just a few questions." "You're a hero. People want to hear your story. A hero." There was that word again. It made him want to scream. "I'm not a hero," Derek said. I was just there. But you saved her life. What made you run toward danger when everyone else was frozen?" Derek opened his mouth to answer, but nothing came out. What could he say? That he'd been on his way to end his own life? That he'd been reaching for a door that led to darkness and screams had pulled him back? That he had no idea why his feet had turned toward the accident instead of into that pawn shop? "I'm sorry, I need to go," he said, and pushed past the reporter. He walked fast, not really knowing where he was going. His truck was still in the parking lot across the street. But he couldn't make himself walk toward it, not yet, because from his truck he could see the pawn shop. And he didn't want to look at it, didn't want to think about what he'd almost done. Instead, he found himself leaning against a brick wall in the shade of an awning, trying to catch his breath, trying to process what had just happened. His phone was buzzing in his pocket. He pulled it out. 5 missed calls. 8 text messages, all from numbers he didn't recognize. How did people already have his number? One text was from his buddy Carlos from the old construction crew. Dude, are you the guy on the news? Everyone's sharing this video. You okay? Video? What video? Derek's hands were still shaking, making it hard to type. But he managed to pull up social media. And there it was. Someone had filmed the whole thing. The car accident. Him running across the street. Him pulling Aisha from the wreckage. Him carrying her in his arms, shirtless and covered in blood. Looking like something out of a movie. The video already had thousands of views. Thousands. And the comments, this man is a real hero. Faith in humanity restored. We need more people like this in the world. Derek felt sick. He closed the app, put his phone back in his pocket. He slid down the wall until he was sitting on the sidewalk, his knees pulled up to his chest. People walked past him, some glancing at him curiously, probably wondering why there was a shirtless, blood-covered man sitting outside a hardware store. He put his head in his hands. 30 minutes ago, that's all it had been. 30 minutes ago, he'd been ready to give up. Ready to stop fighting, ready to believe the lie that the world would be better off without him. And now he'd saved someone's life. A teacher, a daughter, someone's best friend, a woman with students waiting for her to come back to school. A woman who'd looked at him with desperate, trusting eyes and held his hand like he was her lifeline. He'd been her lifeline. Him, Derek Martinez, the failure. The guy who'd lost everything. The guy who couldn't even pay his rent. The guy who'd driven to a pawn shop to buy a gun. That guy had just saved a life. Derek's shoulders started shaking. At first he thought he was laughing. But no, he was crying. Great heaving sobs that he couldn't control. All the pain of the past 3 months came pouring out. The job loss. The divorce. The eviction. The loneliness. The shame. The crushing weight of feeling worthless. It all came out right there on the sidewalk, and mixed in with all that pain was something else. Something he hadn't felt in so long he barely recognized it. It took him a minute to name it. Purpose. For those 15 or 20 minutes carrying Aisha, talking to her, keeping her conscious, getting her to help, he'd had purpose. He'd mattered. His hands, his strength, his presence, they'd made a difference. They'd meant something. Someone lived because he'd been there. A shadow fell over him. Derek looked up, wiping his eyes quickly. It was the gray-haired paramedic from before. Hey, she said gently. You okay? Yeah, I'm fine. Sorry, don't apologize. You're crashing from the adrenaline. It's totally normal. She sat down on the curb next to him, which seemed weird for someone in uniform, but she did it anyway. What you did back there was incredible, really. I just reacted, Derek said. I didn't think about it. That's what makes it incredible. Your first instinct was to help. Do you know how rare that is? She paused. I've been doing this job for 22 years. I've seen a lot of accidents. A lot of people standing around, filming on their phones, posting to social media. Very few people actually step up. Derek didn't know what to say to that. She's going to make it, the paramedic added. That woman, Aisha, she's in bad shape, but she's stable now. And that's because of you. That tourniquet bought her the time she needed. If you hadn't been there, she didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. Do you know? Will she be okay? I mean, long term? The paramedic was quiet for a moment. It's too early to say about her leg. But she's alive. And alive means there's hope. You gave her that. Derek nodded slowly. Alive means there's hope. When had he stopped believing that? When had he decided that being alive was the problem instead of the solution? Listen, the paramedic said. I don't know what you were going through before this happened. But I've been around long enough to recognize someone who's carrying heavy weight. You've got that look. Derek glanced at her. She was watching him with those kind eyes, and somehow that made it worse, made him want to tell her everything. I was having a bad day, he said quietly. A really bad day, I figured. She stood up, brushed off her uniform. Well, you turned someone else's worst day into a day they might survive. That's got to count for something. She handed him a business card. That's my number. If you need someone to talk to, or if you want to know how Aisha's doing, call me. I'll be checking in on her at the hospital. Derek took the card. Lynn Patterson, paramedic. He tucked it into his pocket. Thank you, he managed. Thank you, she said. The world needs people like you. Don't forget that. She walked back toward the ambulance. Derek watched her go, then looked across the street at his truck. And beyond it, the pawn shop. The door he'd almost walked through. He stood up slowly, his legs still shaky. Started walking toward his truck. As he walked, he couldn't help looking at the pawn shop. It was still there, still open. He could still go in, but something had changed. Some invisible thread that had been pulling him toward that door had snapped. Or maybe not snapped, maybe just loosened. Just enough that he could pull back against it. Derek reached his truck and climbed in. The cab was still hot, still uncomfortable. He caught his reflection in the rearview mirror again. Still looked like hell. Still covered in blood. Still the same guy who'd been sitting here an hour ago. But not exactly the same. He started the engine, put the truck in reverse, and as he backed out of the parking spot, he didn't look at the pawn shop again. He drove out of the parking lot and onto the main road, heading home. Or what passed for home these days. That empty apartment with its yellow eviction notice. But for the first time in months, the thought of going back there didn't fill him with despair. It just felt like what came next. Not the end of everything. Just the next thing. His phone buzzed again. More texts. More calls. The video was still spreading. By tomorrow, it would probably be on the news. His face would be everywhere. People would call him a hero, and Derek still didn't feel like a hero. He felt like a man who'd been drowning and suddenly grabbed onto something solid. He felt like someone who'd been lost in the dark and caught a glimpse of light. He felt like someone who wasn't quite ready to give up yet. At a stoplight, he pulled out the paramedic's card. Lynn Patterson. He'd call her tomorrow, find out how Aisha was doing, make sure she was really going to be okay, and maybe, just maybe, he'd tell her the truth about where he'd been headed before the accident, about what he'd been planning to do, about how a stranger's life had somehow saved his own. The light turned green. Derek drove forward, the setting sun casting long shadows across the road. Tomorrow would still bring problems. The eviction, the bills, the job search, the phone calls from collectors. None of that had changed, but he'd face tomorrow. That had changed, because someone had needed him today. And maybe, just maybe, someone would need him tomorrow too. And that was enough to keep driving. Derek didn't sleep that night. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Aisha's face. The fear in her eyes. The blood. The way she'd gripped his hand like she was holding on to life itself. He'd gone back to his apartment, showered for almost an hour trying to get all the blood off. The water had run red for a long time. His jeans were ruined. He'd thrown them in the trash. His work boots too, because he couldn't get the blood out of the seams. Now he sat on the couch in the dark, wearing clean clothes, staring at his phone. The video had gone completely viral. Over 1 million views now. News stations were picking it up. Someone had edited it with dramatic music. Someone else had made it into a motivational post with text overlay. Be the person who runs toward the problem, not away from it. If they only knew. His phone hadn't stopped buzzing. Friends he hadn't heard from in years were calling. His ex-wife had texted 3 times asking if he was okay. Even his old foreman from the construction company had reached out. But the person Derek really wanted to hear from, he didn't know how to reach. Aisha. He needed to know if she was okay. If she'd made it through surgery. If she was going to keep her leg. If she'd survive. He looked at the business card the paramedic had given him. Lynn Patterson. It was almost midnight. Too late to call. But maybe in the morning. Derek stood up and walked to the window. His apartment was on the 2nd floor, overlooking a parking lot that needed repaving. Not much of a view. Not much of anything, really. The eviction notice was still taped to his door. 23 days left now. He should be panicking about that. Should be figuring out where he was going to go. But instead, all he could think about was a woman he'd known for maybe 20 minutes. A stranger who'd become the most important person in his world for those terrifying minutes. His stomach growled. He'd forgotten to eat dinner. Forgotten to eat lunch too, come to think of it. There wasn't much in the fridge anyway. A half-empty jar of peanut butter. Some bread that was probably going stale. A few eggs. Derek made himself a peanut butter sandwich and ate it standing at the counter. It tasted like cardboard, but he forced it down. He needed to eat. Needed to keep his strength up. Though for what, he wasn't entirely sure. His phone rang. It was Carlos again. Derek hesitated, then answered. Hey, man, you scared the hell out of me. I've been trying to reach you all evening. Carlos sounded worried and excited at the same time. Are you okay? Really okay? Yeah, I'm fine. It wasn't my blood. I know. I saw the video. Everyone's seen the video. Derek, you're all over the news. They're calling you a hero. There was that word again. Derek rubbed his face with his free hand. I'm not a hero, Carlos. I was just there. Just there? Dude, you ran into an accident scene and saved someone's life. That's the definition of a hero. Carlos paused. Look, I know things have been rough for you. Real rough. But maybe this is like, I don't know, a sign or something. A sign of what? That you still got it. That you're not done. That you matter. Derek felt his throat tighten. I don't know about that. Well, I do. And hey, speaking of which, you still looking for work? Yeah, of course. My cousin just opened a renovation business. Small crew. Mostly residential stuff. He's looking for experienced guys. I told him about you. He wants to meet with you. Derek's heart jumped. Seriously? Seriously. I sent him the video of you today. He said anyone with instincts like that, who can stay calm under pressure like that, that's someone he wants on his crew. Carlos laughed, though maybe leave out the part about being shirtless and covered in blood for the interview. For the first time in what felt like forever, Derek smiled. Actually smiled. Yeah, probably a good idea. I'll text you his number. Call him tomorrow. His name's Rafael, good guy. Fair boss. They talked for a few more minutes before hanging up. Derek looked at his phone at the number Carlos had just sent. A job lead. An actual job lead. Maybe Lynn the paramedic was right. Maybe being alive meant there was hope. He finally crawled into bed around 2 a.m. Sleep came in fits and starts, full of dreams about crushing metal and blood and a woman's desperate eyes. When Derek woke up, it was almost 9. He'd slept later than he had in months. His body ached like he'd been hit by a truck, probably from carrying Aisha and all that adrenaline, but it was a good ache. An earned ache. He made coffee, weak because he was almost out of grounds, sat at his tiny kitchen table and pulled out Lynn's card. It was Friday morning. She'd be at work. Would she even remember giving him her number? Would she think it was weird that he was calling? Derek took a breath and dialed before he could talk himself out of it. She answered on the 3rd ring. This is Lynn. Hi, this is Derek Martinez. From yesterday? The accident? Derek! Yes, of course. I was hoping you'd call. How are you feeling? I'm okay. Sore but okay, he paused. I was wondering if you knew anything about Aisha, the woman I pulled out. Is she going to be okay? Lynn's voice softened. She made it through surgery. She's in ICU, but she's stable. They had to put some pins in her leg and she's got a long recovery ahead of her. But Derek, she's alive. And the doctor said if she'd been trapped there even 5 more minutes, she probably wouldn't have made it. Derek closed his eyes, felt relief wash over him like a wave. Thank God. Her family's been at the hospital all night. Her parents and her younger brother. They've been asking about you, actually. They saw the video. They want to thank you. They don't need to thank me. I think they disagree with that. Lynn paused. Listen, I probably shouldn't tell you this, but Aisha's been awake a few times. She keeps asking if the man who saved her is okay. I think she'd really appreciate knowing you're all right. Derek's chest felt tight. Would it be okay if I visited? Just for a minute? I think that would be wonderful. Visiting hours are from 10 to 8. She's at County General ICU ward. Just tell them you're there to see Aisha Patel. After he hung up, Derek sat for a long moment. Then he got dressed in his cleanest shirt and jeans, ran a hand through his hair and headed out. The hospital was a 20-minute drive. Derek's truck rattled and coughed the whole way, making him nervous it might not make it. But it held together, and he pulled into the visitor parking lot just before 11. County General was a big place, newer than he expected. The lobby was bright and clean, with volunteers at the information desk. Derek walked up, suddenly feeling nervous. I'm here to see Aisha Patel. She's in ICU. The elderly volunteer checked her computer. Are you family? No, I was there when she got hurt. I helped her. The woman looked up at him. Her eyes widened slightly. Oh my goodness. You're the young man from the video. The one who carried her. Derek felt his face get hot. Yes, ma'am. Well, isn't that something? Her family will be so glad to see you. 3rd floor, ICU wing. Take the elevator on your right. The elevator ride felt like it took forever. Derek's stomach was doing flips. What was he supposed to say? How do you talk to someone you barely know but whose life you saved? The ICU waiting room was small and quiet. A few people sat in chairs looking tired and worried, and then Derek saw them. A middle-aged couple jumped to their feet the moment they saw him. The woman was small, probably where Aisha got her height from, with dark hair and kind eyes red from crying. The man was tall and distinguished-looking, wearing a rumpled button-down shirt like he'd been wearing it for 2 days. "Are you Derek?" the woman asked, her voice breaking. "Yes, ma'am." She rushed forward and wrapped her arms around him. Derek stood there stunned as this stranger hugged him like he was her own son. She was crying into his shirt, saying something he couldn't quite make out. The man stepped forward, his own eyes wet. "Thank you. Thank you for saving our daughter. I was there. Anyone would have done the same." "But they didn't," the man said. Everyone else stood frozen. "You ran toward her. You saved her life." A younger guy, maybe 19 or 20, stood up from one of the chairs. He had Aisha's eyes. "Must be the brother. She told us what you did," he said. "How you talked to her, kept her awake. How you promised you wouldn't let her go." His voice cracked. "You kept that promise." Derek didn't know what to say. The woman finally pulled back from the hug, wiping her eyes. "I'm Priya, Aisha's mother. This is Rajesh, her father, and that's Dev, her brother. It's good to meet you all. I just wanted to check on her, make sure she was okay." "She's been asking about you," Priya said. "She's awake right now if you want to see her." "Just for a few minutes. The doctors are limiting visitors." Derek's heart was pounding. "If that's okay with you, okay." Rajesh put a hand on Derek's shoulder. "We've been hoping you'd come." They led him through the double doors into the ICU. It was quieter here, with the steady beep of monitors and the hiss of ventilators. A nurse directed them to room 312, and there she was. Aisha looked so small in that hospital bed, surrounded by machines and IV lines. Her leg was elevated and wrapped in bandages. Her face was pale, but her eyes were open, and when she saw Derek, those eyes filled with tears. "You're okay," she whispered. "You're really okay." Derek approached the bed slowly. "Yeah, I'm okay. How about you?" "Alive," she gave a weak smile. "Because of you. I'm just glad I was there." Aisha reached out her hand. Derek took it and she squeezed with surprising strength, just like she had during the accident. "I don't really remember everything," she said. "It's all kind of blurry. But I remember your voice. You kept telling me to stay awake. You told me about my students. You told me you were a teacher. 5th grade. 24 kids waiting for me to come back." Her voice got stronger. "And I'm going to go back. The doctor said it'll take time, but I'll walk again. I'll teach again." "Of course you will. Because you gave me that chance." She looked at him intently. "Why did you do it? Run into danger like that? Most people wouldn't." Derek was quiet for a moment. How could he tell her the truth? That he'd been planning something terrible? That saving her life had somehow saved his own? "I saw someone who needed help," he said finally. "And I couldn't walk away from that." Aisha's mother and father stood in the doorway watching them. Priya was crying again, quietly. Rajesh had his arm around her. "The nurses told me you're having a hard time too," Aisha said softly. "That you've been going through some struggles." Derek glanced at the doorway. Had Lynn told them? He supposed it didn't matter. "Yeah, things have been rough lately," he admitted. "Then maybe we saved each other," Aisha said. "Maybe that's how it works sometimes." Derek felt his eyes burning. He blinked quickly. "Maybe so." They talked for a few more minutes before a nurse came in and said Aisha needed to rest. Derek squeezed her hand one more time. "I'll come back and visit if that's okay." "Please do. I'd like that." Out in the waiting room, Aisha's parents wouldn't let him leave without exchanging phone numbers. Priya made him promise to call if he needed anything. "Anything at all. We own a restaurant," Rajesh said. "Come by any time. You'll never pay for a meal there, ever. You don't have to do that." "We want to," Priya said firmly. "And Rajesh's brother owns a construction supply company. He's always looking for good people. If you need work," Derek felt overwhelmed. "Actually, I have a job interview later today. But thank you, really." "How did it go?" Dev asked. "The interview? I haven't had it yet. It's at 3. "You'll do great," Priya said. She hugged him again. "Thank you again. For everything. You gave us our daughter back." Derek left the hospital feeling strange, lighter somehow, like something heavy had been lifted off his shoulders. Something he'd been carrying so long he'd forgotten it was there. He sat in his truck in the parking lot and pulled out his phone, the number Carlos had given him. Raphael's renovation business he dialed before he could overthink it. Hello? Hi, is this Raphael? My name's Derek Martinez. Carlos gave me your number. He said you might be hiring? Derek, yeah. Carlos told me all about you. Sent me that video too. Pretty incredible stuff. I just did what anyone would do. That's not true, but I like your humility. Listen, I got a crew meeting tomorrow morning at 7. Small job, bathroom renovation. Why don't you come by? I'll show you what we're working on. We can talk. If it works out, you can start on Monday. That would be amazing. Thank you. Raphael gave him the address. They talked for a few more minutes about Derek's experience, his skills. When they hung up, Derek sat there staring at his phone, a job. He had a job, maybe, probably. His phone rang almost immediately. Unknown number. Normally he wouldn't answer, but today felt different. He picked up. Is this Derek Martinez? Yes? Hi, this is Jennifer from Channel 7 News. We'd love to interview you about the rescue. Would you be willing to come on our morning show? Oh, I don't know. I'm not really. Please. Our viewers are inspired by what you did. We think your story could really help people. Derek hesitated. Part of him wanted to say no, to stay out of the spotlight. But another part of him thought about what Aisha had said. Maybe we saved each other. Okay, he heard himself say. When? They set it up for Monday morning. Derek hung up feeling dizzy. TV interview, job possibility, hospital visits. This was not what his life had looked like 2 days ago. 2 days ago, he'd been ready to give up. Derek started his truck and headed home. On the way, he passed the pawn shop. He slowed down without meaning to, looked at that door he'd almost walked through. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Hi, Derek, this is Aisha. Dev gave me your number. Hope that's okay. Just wanted to say thank you again. And I meant what I said. I think we saved each other. Get some rest. You're a good person. Derek pulled into a gas station parking lot and read the message again, and again. You're a good person. When was the last time someone had said that to him? When was the last time he'd believed it? He thought about the gun he'd almost bought, about that door he'd almost walked through, about the darkness that had seemed so absolute, so final. And he thought about Aisha's hand gripping his, about her students waiting for her, about her parents' tears of gratitude, about a job interview tomorrow, about a stranger who'd become important to him in 20 minutes. Derek typed back, Thank you. That means a lot. Rest up. I'll come visit again soon. Then he put his truck in gear and drove home. There was still an eviction notice on his door. Still bills he couldn't pay. Still a long road ahead. But for the first time in months, that road didn't seem to lead into darkness. It just led forward, and forward was enough. Tomorrow he'd go to that job site. Monday he'd do that interview. He'd figure out the apartment situation. He'd visit Aisha again. He'd take it one day at a time because now he had days to take. Days he'd almost thrown away. Days that suddenly felt precious and possible and worth fighting for. All because a stranger had needed him. And in helping her, he'd remembered how to help himself. Derek walked up to his apartment, past the yellow eviction notice, and unlocked his door. Inside, the place looked the same. Empty, worn, temporary. But it didn't feel the same. It felt like a starting point instead of an ending, and that made all the difference. Derek showed up at the job site at 6:45 the next morning. He wanted to be early, needed to make a good impression. The address Raphael had given him led to a modest house in a quiet neighborhood. 2 trucks were already parked out front, and Derek could hear power tools running inside. He grabbed his old tool belt from behind his seat. It was worn and dusty, but it was quality. He'd spent good money on it years ago when he first started in construction. A man came out the front door carrying a sheet of drywall. He was maybe 40, built solid with a friendly face and paint-splattered work clothes. You must be Derek, he called out. I'm Raphael. Come on in. Let me show you what we're working on. The handshake was firm. Derek followed him inside where 2 other guys were demolishing an old bathroom. The sound of hammers and pry bars echoed through the house. We're gutting this whole bathroom, putting in new tile, new fixtures, the works, Raphael explained as they walked through. Owner's an older lady, wants to age in place, so we're making it accessible. Grab bars, walk-in shower, the whole deal.